Wollen wir mal ausprobieren bei Zeiten. Könnte witzig sein. Boni! Wollen wir mal Boni gucken? Galerie, was haben wir denn? Cool, wir machen das alles so. Nach der Reihenfolge.
That's a very good question. What does the co-lead game designer of Uncharted 3 do?
We're primarily in charge of making sure that the game. How do you even describe it?
It's so hard. I mean, I look at it as a game designer being the storyteller, you know, the director, the crafter of the experience.
A co-lead game designer at Naughty Dog is responsible for whatever we got to do right now.
That can mean maybe coming up with a good idea. It very often means listening to good ideas from our teammates all around us, not just on the design team, but the artists and the animators, the programmers and the audio people, the visual effects guys that we work with, all are terrific game designers in their own ways.
We wear a lot of hats. I mean, all the leads at Naughty Dog, we have a lot more responsibility, I think, than a lot of studios because we don't have in-house producers. We kind of are the managers and producers of the team.
They're really the ones who handle the scheduling and making sure that all of the individual animations and foreground assets and physics assets and whatever else may be necessary for their levels get into the game at the right time and work awesome and have the design specs and everything of that sort.
My main job is sort of corralling the designers into a sort of coherent vision for what the game is going to come out like and how we translate what we call the active cinematic experience into a gameplay that the player is going to like and be interested in all the time.
I think a game designer's first and most important role is to be an advocate for the player. We're always thinking about the player's experience, really from the very beginning when they become aware of the game, all the way through to, when they're putting in their 100th hour in our multiplayer game. We're always thinking about how can we make their experience better, how can we draw them further into the fictional interactive world that we've created, and how can we entertain them and surprise them and delight them.
We're unwilling to settle for anything other than what we consider to be the best possible experience that we can create.
The whole idea of the active cinematic experience, the playable Hollywood blockbuster, only barely made it in. There was like one moment in Uncharted 1 that pretty much everyone picked out as like, that's the bit that we want to do in Uncharted 2. And so Uncharted 2 was, hey, that little moment, that 30 seconds of gameplay, how do we make a game that evokes that the entire time?
Uncharted 2 was an amazing experience, putting that game together, creating all of that new technology, and doing the groundbreaking things that we did with it. There were so many things in Uncharted 2 that we did that had never been done before. In particular, in terms of having characters running around, interacting on an environment that could move. And so I guess in the process of making Uncharted 3, we really took that idea and ran with it.
Stay down.
We now felt like we had more freedom and time and energy to explore more of the artistic aspects of it. As storytellers, it's really important to us that the viewer is engaged with our characters. What we really put a lot of focus on, especially with Drake, is to convey thought through his body language. When he's in an environment where a tense environment, like we want him to show that. When he's relaxed, we want you to see that. And so we've been able to change the way that he moves based on his environment, based on where he's at in the story. There might be sections where Drake is just completely exhausted, and when you stop moving him, he'll just collapse to the ground, and you kind of pick him back up again, and you feel kind of like, come on, like let's go, it's just a little bit further, we can do this. And it's something that I hope the players appreciate.
Suddenly we have the great majority of the technology that we need to make the type of game that we wanted to make from the beginning. And the question becomes, well, where do we go from here? Immediately, we thought about desert, sand. You know, sand is a very big challenge technologically. It flows and moves and mounds and changes and shifts like water, but also in a more viscous way. So there are all sorts of different gameplay ideas that came from that.
I see him!
If we could do anything at all that we wanted to do with the same kind of technology, what could we do? And that's what's led us to think of insane things like a whole level which turns, you know, through 90 degrees at key stages of the gameplay on the sinking cruise ship.
The cruise ship is one of the most technologically advanced levels I've ever worked on, and certainly I think any other company's worked on. Like, the cruise ship's being driven by a real-time wave ocean simulation that drives the animation of the ship, so it never cycles the same way twice. It feels different every time you play it.
When I started the cruise ship, I was actually planning on faking most of that with animation. But then we have this awesome guy, Carlos Gonzalez here, and he was like, why would you do that? Why would you fake it with an animation when we can make you a fully procedural ocean?
Nice day for a boat ride.
That's one of the other really funny things about Naughty Dog is that I asked for a simpler feature, and Carlos gave me a real-time, fully procedural ocean. That's how Naughty Dog rolls.
The other sort of big thing that we try to do is to make sure that our multiplayer this time felt much more diverse and interesting, and sort of make it a big ticket item.
So what does Uncharted mean, right? Like, it's not only like this big cinematic experience, right? It's also about like your comrades, right? Like the people who you're working with all the time, right? And so we looked at that and like, well, what do we do about that? Okay, well, let's come up with the buddy system. And in single player, we have this cargo plane, and it's really cool sequence in single player. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And I saw that, and I went to Evan Wells, and I said, Evan, we need to use that in a multiplayer map. I'm thinking like the plane's gonna come down this runway, there's gonna be moving trucks around the plane, you're gonna be jumping plane to plane to truck to plane. It's gonna be epic, it's gonna be amazing, it's gonna be incredible. It was one of the most hardest things I've done in my entire life.
I saw that and I was like, I thought about all the people that went into making that, the animators and the foreground artists, and Kurt just sitting there and hooking everything up in all the different possible ways it could work. And I was like, we're crazy. So many weeks of work went into less than a 30-second sequence. You know, I look at the stuff that we do, and I can't believe how much love each individual person puts into the stuff that they're responsible for.
I think that kind of attention to detail is really important for a number of different reasons, but the most important reason is that people recognize it and they love it.
It's those moments that make a Naughty Dog game different. So when you ask why are we passionate about what we do, it's because we're given the opportunity to do this, and we're surrounded by people who can do it and who want to do it.
We have an incredible amount of resources at our disposal, but we think so much bigger than what we have, that there's always something that's pushing us to go a little bit further.
The way the studio gets things done is because people care. And the mentality of the company is, if we see you care so much, then we'll let you go and go take care of it. And I think that's really what makes the company come together.
The game starts simultaneously in the hands of the designers and then in the hands of the writers, Amy specifically. And so they're kind of in parallel. Amy's writing the story and the designers are designing levels. So sometimes a level is designed long before we have any clue what the story is.
It's a very creative environment, and I think in all creative environments you can't just
start 2 years before the project is supposed to be released and say, okay, here's a blueprint of what it's supposed to be. Everyone go off, do their thing, and then we'll meet back here in 2 years and it will be perfect. No. That's not how it works.
One of the things that we wanted to do for this project was to improve the way that the artists could work with the engine. It was a bit rigid, and we were foreseeing a lot more sort of action scenes and cinematic events and all of these things, which require a lot more sort of specific control over the environment.
We've expanded the scope in pretty much every way. Every feature we could think of that would make the game better, we tried it. Most of the time we kept it in. A couple things we tried and didn't like, but in general we've just made everything much bigger and better.
It's very creative in the beginning. After our brainstorming meetings, we know that there's some things. We can go off and start pushing the technology in the direction that we know we might go. But yeah, the storyline, which characters, what they will do, that's all up in the air, and it really comes late in the project.
If you come up with some part of the story that's really neat, but is not going to be very fun, you have to negotiate with the designers. Okay, how can we change the story slightly to make this gameplay fun? And then you have vice versa. If you have a really cool bit of gameplay that doesn't make any sense in the story at all, you have to figure, okay, what can we do? Can we add characters in? Can we take characters out? Can we move them around? For instance, there's a chase scene in Yemen in Uncharted 3 where we're chasing a guy through a level. We had no idea who that guy was for, I'd say, about a year and a quarter. But we had the level. We made it. We didn't know who he was going to be. And then finally the story caught up, and then, boom, we know who that is now.
We were really approaching movie-like quality now in video games, and you have to put some serious effort into adding the detail. One of the main focuses is obviously characters. Our whole game is about characters and making sure that we can really deliver the environment and the storytelling that Amy and all of our designers want to portray in the game. We need to facilitate that somehow, and that is pushing the boundaries for how we do character animation, pushing the boundaries of grounding in the environment, things we didn't have in Uncharted 2 that just adds that little extra believability to the game. For example, if you're running really fast into a corridor with a 90-degree turn, you don't just happily take the corner, you actually kind of struggle, you touch the wall maybe to push yourself forward. That was one of the character and the animators' vision, if you will. They really wanted the characters to look better. But on the other hand, we also have many customers, and one of them would be our game designers.
I remember Jacob Minkoff, one of the lead designers on U3. I remember at the very beginning, when he came up with the cruise ship level, and he kind of laid it all out. He was like, okay, tell me now if this is impossible. And we were like, it's too cool to be impossible. We have to find a way to do it.
A ship seems like a great thing, it's something which makes it more interesting because it's actually moving. So when you climb on a boat, it's quite different from climbing on a solid structure. The biggest change for us in terms of graphics was that now you're talking about the whole group of things that is together, moving together. So essentially they're levels that are strung together, and the whole level is moving. It's not individual object, it's a level that is moving. And we didn't have that before, so we needed to implement that.
We had technological challenges for almost every single level. The burning and collapsing building while you're in it. The cruise ship that is actually being driven by huge, enormous waves to rotate an environment 90 degrees and have the character and the objects and everything still work. And now you're walking on like the side of the environment instead of the floor. It's not something that's trivially accomplished.
For instance, the water pouring down the hallways, we tried a bunch of different things. Our original plan was to do it using like some sort of real-time physics stuff, and then we tried offline physics, and then we went back to real-time, and then we finally came up with animating offline physics simulations, and then bringing them into the game, and then mixing them with different real-time physics at the same time, kind of a hybrid approach. And all of that stuff we kept failing over and over until we finally figured it out. It's how almost all of the stuff gets in the game. We fail about 100 times, and then we get one, we finally figure it out, and then it's it.
There's a spark in everyone to create something, and give them enough things to play with, they'll create something awesome.
We love our open floor plan, the ability for everybody to hear what's going on just by sitting down. Just if you're working normally, you will hear everything that's going on around you, which is awesome. It takes a little getting used to if you're easily distracted, but sometimes being easily distracted is good because you'll be able to influence something that needs your input that maybe they didn't know they needed your input.
It is so fulfilling walking away and saying, you know what, that game we made, it wasn't just, which we hope, obviously, well received by our fans, but it was fun to make. Like we are engineers, we're game players, we write story, we write game design, but at the end of the day, we like playing games.
Visuals are like plot points, you don't just sort of write a story not knowing where you're going. You've got specific points you're trying to emphasize. Same thing with color. Color makes you feel a certain way. Pink, reds, greens, purples, all have an emotional effect on human beings. So you want to direct that color in service of the story you're trying to tell.
You want the final product to be valuable. You want it to be something that you can be proud of and something that is valid as an art form.
As an art director, you try to make sure the game is consistent. You try to make sure that we're using color and shape and lighting to all enhance the particular story we're telling. We want to make sure that everything emphasizes, sadness, happiness, excitement, danger, low points, high points.
What really puts it together is the concept. The concept art will determine the lighting and the general macro of the look. It'll give you a good framing of the level and give you the feel, which is probably the most important thing. The artist needs to get the feel of the level so he can put the appropriate details.
We always go to an amazing lost civilization that we've never seen before, and that's always the challenge to come up with. This one, it's Sandlantis. It's this lost Arabian city that's in the middle of nowhere, and the hard part there is coming up with something that looks believable, that we've never seen before, but also looks historically accurate.
We definitely have a lot of different inspiration, and it definitely comes from everywhere in the company. I don't think there's a single person who has managed to sit still for the whole duration of the game and just do their own thing. They'll always want to contribute to the rest of it.
You got to do a lot of research into the architectural style. What are the sort of specific idioms that make something look authentic to that area? The motifs, what are they doing? What are the materials they're using?
The texture shader artists paint textures for the surfaces that you see in the game. They plug those into shaders, and then through the shader you can apply surface qualities like wetness or dryness or whatever you need.
My team's responsible for all the weapons, props, vehicles. Anything that moves in the game is not a character, falls underneath the technical art / prop artist team.
We kind of take the world that's given to us and try to add motion to it, try to add the subtleties that really sort of make an environment pop. Or take a collapse and add the dust, the debris, the volumetrics, and a little more of the bang to it. Kind of like the frosting on the cake.
Oh, man, that was close, huh? Amy does a lot of research. the cool thing about the games is they're based in history and reality. So she always comes up with something that is real, authentic, exists in the world in terms of legend, and then we have to come up with what it looks like.
We do a lot of research, and hopefully it's tangible in the game when people play it, that the devil's in the details, and a lot of us are pretty kind of OCD, anal retentive, whatever you want to call it, about sort of perfecting the details of things, and that we want it to be right. If we're going to have a foreign language in the game, we want it to be correct. If we're going to say this level takes place in one area of the world, we do a ton of research to make sure that it's accurate.
She holds us pretty true to history, so you can't just go crazy and like come up with all sorts of fanciful stuff. It has to be rooted in something authentic. So that's the challenge in terms of making these civilizations that look incredible and amazing, but everything in there is based on something we've done research about.
We use film, we use whatever kind of reference we can get our hands on to see, how have other people represented this before, and what do we want to do differently? What are our favorite elements of that? What are the things that, are like those key moments,
We tend to go a little bit nuts in terms of gathering reference, in terms of talking about it, in terms of watching movies. We even had some of our team sliding down sand dunes in the desert to figure out just what that would look like.
It was a very, very crazy, fun trip, but it was fascinating and really actually inspiring to see that when you step in this really soft sand, the sand flowing down the ridge actually looks so liquid, almost kind of equivalent to mercury. Like there's a little bit of viscosity to it, but it actually looks like a liquid. And so we just went out there with our cameras, got sand everywhere, and just pulled in a dozen hours of amazing reference of us diving down the dunes, of us running up and down the dunes and crawling the different ways like you would actually move if you were tired, because it was 114 degrees outside and we were exhausted.
After collecting ridiculous amounts of reference, we tend to just have at it, in the sense that let's just start building things. There's definitely a degree of, okay, let's figure out the big shapes and let's figure out the big picture. But we are detail obsessed. So we sometimes go right for the details. And that sometimes isn't so bad a thing.
Putting the details in the environment is actually a Naughty Dog quality, almost to a fault, and we actually have to stop ourselves from just putting too much.
I assume Rich talked a lot about how just in depth he went to making sure that the London pub was completely authentic. And I can't say I was part of that. It would have just been just a few too many British people in the kitchen, if you will, had we all kind of ganged up and tried to create it as authentically as possible. But I certainly did witness that, and it's really nice to see whenever a Naughty Dog gets that into the details. I was particularly concerned about people in the UK feeling like this was a real place, somewhere that maybe they recognized if they traveled to the East End of London. So that was a fairly easy sell for me with my teammates.
Typical bloody Yank, all talk.
It felt like we'd already kind of hit the peak. How do we beat that? How do you beat so many Game of the Year awards? Like, do you even try? And yes, you definitely try. Whether you succeed or not probably isn't so important.
Everybody has done such an amazing job. And you walk through the studio and you look at any monitor and you got to take a double take. And you wait, what level is that? Who's working on that again? Because it all looks so great.
Uncharted is probably the most exciting IP I've ever worked on because of just the improvements in each iteration, just the improvements from 1, 2, and 3. The team continues to evolve and just get better. And whether that's just people that are just working really hard to create better content, or the new blood that we're bringing in every iteration that adds a new flavor to the DNA of the company and just puts it to the next level, is just amazing. I can't wait for the next following games that we're going to be working on.
Are you my enemy, American?
Drake. My name is Drake.
it's always challenging when you're working in this genre and you're trying to come up with a sequel, because so much of the territory is so well trodden, and we have to find that sweet spot between surprising our fans and also providing the familiar experience that they want.
If you recall, the last time we went halfway around the world searching for a lost city, things got more than a little dicey.
Yeah, but this time we have the upper hand. Uncharted 3 has some big shoes to fill. Uncharted 2, we were very lucky. We got like tons of awards for that game. It's sort of like, where do we go now, you know?
What the hell?
Let's do it.
I think what would surprise people is that when we set out to figure out what we're going to do with each new game, a lot of it is driven by practical concerns rather than just sort of purely creative ones. People probably imagine we sit there and just sort of blue sky story and things like that, and actually what we do is we think, all right, where have we not been? What technologies have we not pushed? What would challenge us as game developers? And what are some really awesome set pieces that would blow people's minds? And then we kind of write the story around that. And that sounds almost like an embarrassing admission, but I think it's the way it should be done.
All right, what is all this crap you're
why
giving
don't you
me
just
about
complain
Sully?
with me? Those guys are not here for historical research, and neither are you.
It's like right brain, left brain, where one part is like dealing with the aesthetics and what you're trying to go for creatively, and the other part, of course, is like how to realize that. And, you know, that's usually a lot of problem solving. So you have to kind of like bring those together in a way that you get the most bang for the buck and get things to really come alive in the game.
From the very beginning, when we're coming up with a story, it's not just Amy, it's Amy and myself and Justin and Taylor and Richard and other people putting in their 2 cents for ideas, and the entire company really participates in that process. But even then, once we get to the stage, it's Amy's script, but then it's the actors' own input into their characters that influences the way that we end up doing the performances.
Drake, we must go, now! Yalla!
Never a dull moment, huh, Sully?
Why change now?
Yeah!
We want contributions from everybody. We carry that same philosophy onto the stage with the actors. We don't just go into the voice studio and stand an actor in front of a copy stand and a microphone and say, well, here's your lines, just read them. We shoot the story as if it were film or television or theater. And of course, that means the actors get to sort of settle into their characters as well. They genuinely enjoy working together. And, you know, again, some of the best moments are completely improvised by them. And I will always give them credit for that. And some of the most sort of touching moments are because these aren't people that just met, you know. They've known each other for 5 years and they actually have this relationship.
You have these actors who have played these characters now for the 3rd game in a row, and they know these characters. They've helped build these characters really from scratch. It's really interesting to see them get to really kind of spread your wings isn't the right way to put it. These actors are getting a chance to sort of explore the corners of who these actors are, of who these characters are.
You can skip the mind games. You don't know me.
You know, if we come up with some ideas on the spot, you know, we'll try them out, and if they end up working, then we'll use them. I mean, probably one of the best examples of that is even from the first game when Nolan and Emily had a scene where Elena's character had just caught up with Nathan Drake's character and she was pissed off, and we ran the scene a few times, and Emily just said, hey, you know, I feel like I should hit him here. And, you know, it wasn't in the script, but we thought, yeah, okay, that might actually be funny. So, you know, we get in the scene and she does this like, hug it. And, you know, of course it worked great, and that ended up making it into the final cinematic in Uncharted 1. And that kind of stuff happens all the time.
If you just watch their faces when they're saying a line, there's the essence of it right there. Now, we don't just kind of mimic it, but that is our reference. That is where, you know, that's what we kind of, that's our launching off point. And then we take that and we enable our animators to interpret that in the way that's gonna serve us best.
He's not here.
We do not do and never have done any facial animation capture. There's a number of reasons for that. We actually looked into a couple of possibilities when we were first working on Uncharted 1, but ultimately it ends up giving us more limitations than it does flexibility. We have some phenomenal animators back in the office that can really craft the performances to be exactly what we want them to be. And when you're working with facial capture, you know, you're just kind of stuck with what you got, and you got to spend all this time cleaning it up to get to where you want it to be. So why not just do what you want from the get-go?
God, what a dick, right? Come on. We gotta find a way out of here fast.
We're completing the performance that was started on the stage. You know, we have amazing actors who give us these incredible little vignettes of, you know, scenes that are very personal, and I love the energy that they have with each other, and we need to make sure that what they started is completed.
Nate, just who are we dealing with here?
Working on the third outing in a series, you have to think about, you know, how are you changing things up? And you want to do it in ways that are meaningful, but sometimes you arrive at them in ways that are sort of simple and obvious. And one of the things that immediately occurred to us is it'd be more interesting to see a female antagonist this time.
Same cocky little shit. So fearless. I wonder what you're really afraid of.
And it'd be more interesting to have a antagonist who was more cerebral and therefore challenged Drake in different ways.
You get off on all this, don't you? Cheating death.
It's a very different character to try to write. It's actually a much harder character to try to write, and it was a much harder character to cast. And thank God we found Rosalind Ayers, because she brought something really unusual, I think, to the character.
I'm sorry, Nathan. It seems you've been removed from the equation.
It's been a lot of fun to have a female villain, and she's kind of wicked.
Catherine!
She gets into your head, and she wants to know what makes you tick, and she wants to know what you're afraid of, and she'll find out.
But she's also, like, sweet, and it's very unnerving in a good way. That's I think what makes her a good villain is that she's prim and proper and wicked.
Yes, it is regrettable, but...
Not regrettable. Sloppy.
One of the things you want to do is delve more into Drake and his background and his personality, his relationship with Sullivan, how that came to be. But also, it says something about... His past says something about how he is in the present, just like it does for all of us, right?
I just want to make sure we're doing this for the right reasons. You got your pride all tangled up in this thing. It's making you reckless. I taught you better than that.
I've always perceived Drake as someone who has some issues about loss and abandonment, and, you know, therefore keeps people at arm's distance. And when things get too real, he's real good at being the hero, but when things get too real, he might make himself scarce. We don't know people like that in real life, do we? No.
We've been trying to reach you for over 24 hours. Oh, right, I need to top up my minutes. You're using a prepaid phone? Mate, those contracts are a complete rip-off.
What? Mine's broken.
I've been working with Amy and Taylor on the Uncharted games since the very beginning, right? And the three of us have this rapport and communication that enable us to really collaborate and work together and get the best possible results from each other.
Come on, admit it. You love all this as much as I do.
Naughty Dog is, I think, very unusual in the fact that we've actually grown to be a pretty large developer, but we've retained that sort of garage shop mentality and really collaborative spirit and a very, very flat hierarchy. There's not a lot of management or order or organization. You know, it's mostly just sort of seat of the pants chaos, to be honest.
Well.
It's cute.
What?
Because it's a well.
Shall we?
We don't have like a typical structure where we have a producer that kind of goes around and coordinates all the various aspects of the game.
And ultimately, what you see in the end result in the cinematics is really the product of dozens of different people's ideas and vision. It's not just one person saying it's my way or the highway. Everything goes in.
It's hard, I think, as a writer to say, all right, everybody just trust me and come along on this journey with me, while you yourself are terrified that, you're hoping that all of these ideas coalesce.
You are a crafty little beggar, aren't you?
I know how to take care of myself.
On the other hand, part of, I think, the experience and the act of faith in yourself is, well, I've been doing this for 22 years, and I've always pulled it off, that you as a creator and a writer, as well as trusting in the people around you, that the right answers will be there when you need them.
It's going to be really gratifying when this thing that seemed like it was going to be impossible to do actually happens, and we just sort of rain that down on the fans, and that's going to be sort of an amazing, amazing moment, I think. I'm looking forward to that.
Perfect. Here we go.
Dann wollen wir uns doch mal die Konzepte angucken. Nein, kein Konzept, legendär und die Kills wollen mehr. Nicht wahr? Kommt man ja mal heben, ne? Ich finde es immer crazy, wie viele von diesen Sachen man einfach so übersieht, ne? Underground. Ja, das war auch cool. I love it when you call me so. Junger Drack. Das ist die Wohnung von dem Bruder. Aha. One Agent. 007. Okay. Wer das gemalt hat, der Zana. Respekt, Bruder. Hat der auch gemalt. Ach, guck mal, den kennen wir. Die Marke da unten rechts, die Unterschrift, die kennen wir aus anderen Teilen noch, Freunde. Den auch. Zana wieder. Akim kennen wir auch schon. Alter. Hauptsache, ohne Scheiß, Hauptsache, ich sehe gar nicht die ganzen Bilder. Die sind bei mir wie ein bisschen noch reingezoomt. Die sehe ich bei ihrem OBS, sehe ich die richtig und bei euch in der Live-Aufnahme. Brutal. Einfach fucking brutal, wie Leute zeichnen können. Das sind also die verhurten Spinnen, ja. Cool. Ja, das ist cool. Oh ja, das war auch ganz cool, das Rätsel eigentlich. Der mag kein... da... Ah, der Robber. Der Rob... Wir haben das gezeichnet. Fester sauber. Fester bearbeitet. Das ist ein schickes Moped. Piratenkapitän. Der Piratenkapitän. Heavy. Rocket Launcher. Granate Launcher. Das hat einfach jemand gemalt. Das ist... Ich weiß nicht, echt zu sagen, so ehrlich. Voilà. Na, 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 na. Ach, zu wild, Freunde. Stichtigen Siege und ja 550 Gegner haben wir knapp besiegt. Dann haben wir sie hier geschattet und neu geschattete Punkte 44. Alright, you guys. Das ging ja auch nicht. Zeitentdeckung, genau 22 Minuten und 22 Sekunden. So,